From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? I'm glad we're back and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, I'm doing good, Steve. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. I'm uh, excited to have another session with you to answer some of our mailbag questions. And as we mentioned in our last episode, we're going to try to do a little bit more of this in the spirit of Ask the Programmer, and we're trying to encourage our audience to help us keep those questions coming. So today we're going to talk about something that I think is going to be essential to everybody who's listening and probably can relate to this. The question is, what is the right way to debug a system? And the kicker is when things work most of the time. So I think it's important to understand how to debug a system in general, but doing it when things work most of the time is something that is always elusive. Um, James, do you have any thoughts to kick us off?
Yeah, my thought is there is no right way. There is the way that works for you. Um, and that's really the key. Like when you're trying to track down a bug, that what we call them in programming world, the bug. When we're trying to track that down, especially when it's hard to replicate, is you got to start, you know, somewhere. Um, you pick that spot and you start from there and see, okay, is it before or after this? Can I do this? And things I start doing is, especially when they're hard to produce and stuff, I throw a log in certain areas. So, like, if I'm sitting there and the user's like, oh, it's not always turning on the display. Okay, cool, and I can't replicate it. What I'll start doing is throwing a log in every time that you're communicating with the display to see, okay, what information is going on for the system at this time, and see if you can capture one of those. It may take you some time to figure it out and read the logs, but that's one way to throw it in there. Um, it's kind of like the Einstein puzzle. I don't know if you ever taken that one, see, but where they have five houses, it's like five houses, five people in each house, a different pet in each house, and they start giving you clues, and you got to try to figure out who owns the fish, or who, like, you got to figure it out with the clues they give you. Same thing with programming. We have to use clues that are given to us. That's why we ask questions. What were you doing when it happened? What page were you on? What was the equipment doing? What did you see happen? What did you hear happen? Like, those are questions that we take to try to diagnose what is going on.
I like where you're going with that. I think it's logging was one of the things that I was going to suggest. I think this also sometimes can be a communication issue. So, being able to, if you can't demonstrate it, having somebody show you where the issue is, or what they determine the issue to be, or when, or put have them give you some tangible definition to what they're reporting. Because sometimes you could say that the something turned off, but it may be that you just have no image, or that there's some there are different ways to describe different scenarios, and I think that's very critical. Um, when
Yes.
you're debugging to, it's one thing to debug code, and when you debug code, usually you're going to get errors, and you're going to have to go to specific lines and see where the issue is, and that's how you narrow it down, and you get you're given some context clues. When you're debugging a system, it, it's a lot harder, and you have to figure out how do I narrow down what the problem is, and I have to start to eliminate variables. And one of the things I I think troubleshooting is our number one skill the AV industry. And if you're not a good troubleshooter, it's very hard for you to be successful in the field. But part of that is being disciplined and only changing one thing at a time and test. And it's very easy if
Yep.
you're not disciplined like that to get yourself really twisted because you don't really know where what it is that you're trying to figure out because things too many things are changing. So um, the most of the time part of this is the hard part and that
Yep.
and part of that I think comes from experience. I think those of us who have been doing this for a long time have a huge advantage because you always remember the times where you were burned and the times when you had the most challenging issues and you store them up and usually they
Mm.
come back to benefit you later on but it's having that knowledge base to be able to rely upon goes a long way. um, but if we're talking about doing this from a logical standpoint, I think it's just really important to understand what the issue is, to narrow it down as much as possible, and to your point, put some tests into place to try to um, make the create the scenario and see what's actually happening.
And I think you hit on a couple of things, a good thing there, Steve, is one, it is definitely communication. Communication is huge because you both got to be on the same page. Um, I I remember we had my old job where we got a ticket in where a user said, "Hey, the overhead projector is not working." Cool. Well, one of the techs looked at it and go, "We don't have overhead projectors. They're wrong. Close the ticket." Because in his mind, overhead projectors were the old school lamp base where you put the transparency on and it shows on the screen. And he was correct. We don't have those. The user was talking about the projector over their head, the overhead projector. So it was both were right, but they were communicating in inefficient, not efficiently with each other. So getting in the room, be like, hey, show me what you're talking about so I can be on the same page as you is vital. That having that communication. And then also documentation. It's everyone hates doing documentation, but it's good to document to see a pattern. And I'll tell you from personal experience. I remember I was tracking down a problem, and while I was tracking, I had another problem I didn't even realize I had, but I started to see the pattern, but I wasn't documenting, but it was a weird one. But while I was working on one issue, and I called tech support with the company, and I was going through everything with them, and I was like, "Hey, I have this firmware." And the response right away was, "Oh, you have that firmware?" I'm like, "Yeah, why? What's wrong with that one?" And they're like, "It has the 90-day bug in it." I'm like, "What 90-day bug?" They're like, "Oh, where the system locks up every 90 days and you have to reboot it." I'm like, "Wait, that solves other issues I'm having. I didn't even put the pattern yet because you had to wait 90 days." So yeah, sometimes you just have to document to start seeing the pattern, like, oh, every 90 days it's happening.
That's
But
a good one.
also, yeah, that is a real good one. And then another one is sometimes you got to try to recreate the whole environment. And that I'm not even talking about the AV system, but the whole environment. Now I was not part of this, but I had somebody tell me this story where they were having a weird issue in a high-end boardroom. And the company, the user would call and be like, "Hey, we're having this problem. It's brain." They use the word random. Everyone used the word random. Um, so the integrator company went out and they couldn't replicate the issue, but the issue kept happening. The user was like, it's random, it's happening, it's disrupting our meetings. They got to the point where they actually brought the manufacturer A team out for a week to try to figure out what was going on. The manufacturer's best person was banging their head against the wall. They're like, we can't replicate this issue. We don't know what's going on. And finally, the tech is like, I need a snack. He walks out the room, and there's a vending machine outside the room. And as he's getting the snack from the vending machine, people start running. It's doing it. It's doing it. There was a surge from the vending machine causing noise on the line. So it only happened when someone got something from the vending machine.
Wow.
Yeah,
I was going to tell you some other story that it's eerily similar to what you said, but yours is better. But it was a similar type of thing that was so random that was happening that had nothing to do with the system, but was causing interference. And
yep,
you could troubleshoot day and night, but that is a classic, and
it
it's
is.
probably not the only time that something like that has happened. I'm sure, because if I can relate to it with a similar story, I'm sure many others can as well. But
Yeah,
great, great, great story, and that's see, that's one of those that you remember because now you could say environmental. What are the environmental conditions?
yeah. And how many of us actually even think about that? And that's the thing is, okay, now that's in my toolbox.
Hmm.
I never experienced, but I heard it from a contact. I'm like, hey, I've never thought of that. Let me throw that in my toolbox from now on. So when I'm tracking down a problem I don't know about, well, maybe it's environmental. And I've gotten some funny looks at people when they're like, oh, something's not working right here. Have you tried a different power outlet? Well, it's power is power. Well, no, there could be noise outlet line. Let's try a different outlet.
I think the two things that you hit on right there are really important. One is to be able to have another system that you could test with, or be able to simulate the system in a under similar conditions, to see if you're getting the same results. And then the second part is to be able to consider some of the things that you wouldn't normally think about, but could have real issues that like power surges, weather, um, things that are outside of the space that you're working in. Very, very important. The the thing that I would like to point out too, and I think that we should spend a little bit of time talking about, is from a programming standpoint, and from that having something that is working 90% of the time is not not a working system. And I think that that's something that we
Mhm.
we need to really touch on. Now, we've had conversations in the past and a few episodes ago where we talked about, doing it right, doing it perfectly, and so on and so forth. But having having random issues is not a working system. And I think that that is something that we need to really clarify. And when we are looking at our code and we're looking at doing um, modifications or service to system, we shouldn't be fixing the symptoms. We should be fixing the problem. And I think it's important to be able to narrow that down and get to the root cause, because fixing the systems, it may get you from 90% to 95%, but it's not going to get you to a fully working stable system. And to me, stability is what builds confidence for our users and what makes them believe in what we're doing. So I don't know if you had any more thoughts for
Oh,
that.
yeah. I don't know how many times I've been burned by workarounds. And like sometimes you sit there and be like, why did they do it this way? This is not the right way. And then you pull that back and you do it the correct way, and then major issues happen. And you're like, oh, So instead of going after the root cause and, doing these things proper and having communication with other stakeholders, they threw a workaround in to get the job done, but they now causing more problems because when you get someone in who sees like, oh, well, your workaround is not the best way of doing it. It's not the efficient way. And they take it back, and all of a sudden there's more issues, and they start peeling those onions back and those layers back. And they're like, what? You could have solved all of this. You caused more work for yourself because you didn't want to talk to someone. Like the biggest ones I've seen is when they're dealing with networking and they don't want to talk to the network administrator and they don't want to get the network figured correctly for them. So they throw workarounds in. And then you get someone to be like, well, this workaround's not right. Let's get it done right. And then wait, the network's not right. Now we got to fix the network. Oh, wait, this is not right. And then we got to fix that. And you're just continuing down the line fixing where you could have done it right in the beginning.
Th- That is a great tip, and probably a good way for us to sum this one up is that, when you're trying to debug a system that works most of the time is find the root cause, put the time in, make the effort to really address the issue because the workarounds are going to come back to burn you later. I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to sum this one up. Um, Hope that this is something that you out there that are listening find valuable. It's another question from our mailbag, and really the essence of what Ask the Programmer is all about. So please keep on sharing your questions, your thoughts. If you'd like to be a subject matter expert on a show to answer a question, please reach out to us and let us know. We certainly have quite a few questions that it would be great to have a guest join us and provide some additional insight and give us some varying perspectives on the questions and the answers that we can provide. James, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to continue this conversation, if they'd like to know what you're up to, or just reach out and say hi?
Again, you Google me, you can find me. I'm on the socials, X as AV_James King. I'm on LinkedIn, as a programmer community. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
And for me, you could find me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. I would like to recommend that you reach out through LinkedIn. I think that's a great place. Our industry is really finding to congregate and to keep in touch. And as James mentioned, we have the Ask the Programmer community. It's very easy to join, and it's something that we hope to invest more into and to provide a place for us to elaborate on some of these shows and some of the questions that we're proposing, and our answers are only our answers. We'd like to hear some of yours as well. My company, Control Concepts, we provide some of the building blocks that programmers can use to interface products and also add functionality to their systems. And you can find that at controlconcepts.net. We are providing this show in a video form on YouTube and on the audio form in your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to, you could check out one or the other, but feel free to leave a comment, review, question in those places, or engage with us in the Ask the Programmer community on LinkedIn. And we certainly would like to hear from you, and we'd like to encourage you to reach out and let us know what you'd like to learn more about and give us some more insight into how to fuel some of these conversations. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This has been Ask the Programmer.